Hello, I am Dr. Sarika Swami, Assistant Professor in Pediatrics in SP Medical College, Bikaner. And students, I will be teaching you acute bacterial meningitis or acute pyogenic meningitis. So meningitis, as the name suggests, it is inflammation of meninges and it is a major cause of morbidity and mortality in young children. It may be sporadic, it may be epidemic depending on the etiology. Like cases of meningococcal meningitis may come to us in epidemic form and most other types are sporadic in nature. Now, if we look at the epidemiology of pyogenic meningitis, mostly small children like neonates and infants are more commonly involved than older children. The hosts who are deficient in complement components or immunoglobulins or who are having neutrophil function defects or who are malignant or on immunosuppressive agents like steroids, they are more prone to develop acute pyogenic meningitis. Organisms, if we look at beyond neonatal period, these are the H. influenzae type B, Streptococcus pneumoniae, Neisseria meningitidis, and if we look at common organisms in India, they are Streptococcus pneumoniae, Staph aureus, Neisseria meningitidis, H. influenzae type B. Though the incidence of meningitis by these organisms have reduced drastically after introduction of vaccines again against all these organisms, but cases still occur. Now I tell you how the bacteria reach to the meninges and how it causes meningitis. So it may be a hematogenous spread if a child is suffering from pneumonia, empyema or pyoderma or osteomyelitis. It may be a direct implantation after head injury. If child is suffering from sinusitis, mastoiditis or osteomyelitis, it may also happen by contiguous spread. Those children who are having pilonidal sinus, who are having CSF rhinorrhea or fracture of cribriform plate is there, then these children may suffer from recurrent meningitis. So if any child comes to us with recurrent meningitis, we should rule out these causes of recurrent meningitis. Now, how the things happen and progress. First of all, commonly there is colonization of nasopharynx by bacteria. Then bacteria are transported to intravascular space, and once the bacteria are in the blood through the choroid plexus, they reach in the CSF, and because CSF is having very less WBCs in it and also very low levels of complement and immunoglobulins, so this actually favors the multiplication of the bacteria. And because of the multiplying bacteria and lysis of the bacteria, the host reacts by inflammation and there is release of inflammatory markers and this leads to meningeal inflammation. Now what happens that there is increased CSF cytokines and chemokines, that is tumor necrosis factor and interleukin 1. This causes increased permeability of blood-brain barrier. There is vasogenic edema and leakage of protein in subarachnoid space. Ultimately, there is formation of subarachnoid exudate, and this subarachnoid exudate causes obstruction to flow of CSF and also it decreases the resorptive capacity of arachnoid granulations, and this leads to obstructive or communicating hydrocephalus, which leads to vasogenic edema. The neutrophils degranulate and they secrete toxic metabolites and this leads to cytotoxic edema. Now, how the child presents to us. The condition is an acute and febrile illness. The child is having irritability, is photophobic, and he may have severe headaches. Child may have seizures, may have altered consciousness. The signs of meningeal irritation, that is neck stiffness, Kernig sign and Brudzinski sign, are positive. And tachycerebral, what is tachycerebral? When we stroke the skin of the abdomen, it becomes red and raised, that we call as tachycerebral. Deep tendon reflexes are mostly exaggerated. Child may have hemiparesis, cranial nerve palsies and hemianopsia. In late cases, because of tentorial herniation, child may have periodic breathing or child may have shock. A little bit I want to tell you about Brudzinski sign and Kernig sign. To elicit Brudzinski sign, we ask the child to lie supine, and now we flex the neck of the child, and when we flex the neck of the child, there is flexion of hips and knees because of meningeal inflammation. This is Brudzinski sign. To elicit Kernig sign, what we do that we ask the child to lie supine, we keep one leg of the child flexed at the hip joint, and now what we do that we try to extend the knee joint of the child, so there will be restriction in extension of the knee joint, so that is Kernig sign. These both signs are here in meningitis because of meningeal inflammation. In smaller children, the child may not have typical features of meningitis, like he may not have signs of meningeal irritation. The child may come to us with fever, or child may have hypothermia, child may have alternating irritability and drowsiness, may have seizures, may just come to us with refusal to feed, child may have seizures, may have neurological deficits, poor tone, poor cry. So to detect meningitis in a small child, in an infant, we should have that in mind. Then only we will be able to look for these features. Some special features are associated with some special organisms which are causing meningitis. Like type A meningococcal meningitis comes in epidemic forms, type B is mostly sporadic, and overcrowding predisposes it. If we see a child with meningitis who is having petechial hemorrhages on skin and mucosa, then we should think of meningococcal meningitis, and the course is very fatal. The child may have meningococcemia, and child may have Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. Because of bilateral adrenal hemorrhage, child may go into shock. So this is about meningococcal meningitis. What is specific about pneumococcal meningitis? That subdural effusions are common complication if organism is pneumococci. So in this CT scan, you can see that this is the subdural space, and this is enlarged in this particular patient. So this is subdural effusion. And if the meningitis is because of H influenzae type B, then there are chances that child will develop residual auditory deficits. That is a common complication. Now, what can be the complications of acute pyogenic meningitis? Child may have subdural effusion or empyema. Child may have ventriculitis, arachnoiditis, brain abscess, and hydrocephalus. We should think of complication if child is not responding to the usual treatment, if fever recurs after once responding to the antibiotics, if child develops new focal neurological deficits even after starting treatment, and if constitutional symptoms recur. Various long-term complications of acute pyogenic meningitis are hemiplasia, aphasia, ocular palsies, blindness, sensorineural hearing loss, and mental retardation. So now coming to diagnosis, by history and physical examination, we can make a probable diagnosis that yes, this child may be suffering from uh, pyogenic meningitis. We perform lumbar puncture to confirm our diagnosis, but here I want to emphasize that we should keep in mind the contraindications of lumbar puncture, which are papilledema on fundus examination, bleeding diastasis, and local infection at the site of lumbar puncture. On CSF examination in pyogenic meningitis, we find increased number of cells which are mostly polymorphonuclear. Proteins are very much high. Sugars are less than 50% of the blood sugar, or they are less than 40 milligram percent. On gram staining, we may find specific organisms like pneumococci. CSF culture and sensitivity we have to send so that we can revise our antibiotics. Blood culture has to be sent in every case. CT or neuroimaging is not needed in routine, but if we think of some complication in the form of subdural effusion or empyema or ventriculitis or infarction or abscess, then certainly we should go for neuroimaging. Rapid diagnostic tests are available for tuberculosis, herpes simplex virus infection, and meningococci. Molecular diagnostic techniques are also available in the form of RT-PCR. Now we sometimes need to differentiate pyogenic meningitis from various other conditions. Like a child with enteric fever may have neck stiffness, which we call as meningism. In these cases, uh, the CSF will be normal. Viral meningitis presents more acutely. Marked sensorial alteration is there because brain parenchyma is commonly involved. Child may have altered behavior, and you may find history of upper respiratory infection or exanthem or conjunctivitis or parotitis. Sometimes complex febrile seizures are also confused with pyogenic meningitis, but children with complex febrile seizure are non-toxic and they show quick recovery, and lumbar puncture is normal in these cases. Tubercular meningitis is an important differential diagnosis of pyogenic meningitis, especially partially treated pyogenic meningitis. So, in TBM cases, you will find history of contact. The disease is having subacute onset. Lymphadenopathy, you may find focal deficits are more pronounced in cases of tubercular meningitis, and CSF finding, which show you the cobweb formation. Protein will be near, say, 100 to 500 range. Sugars will be low but not very low, and cells will be more of lymphocytic type. So these are the differentiating features of CSF in tubercular meningitis cases. Now coming to the treatment part, we first start empiric antibiotic, and later on specific diagnosis we can narrow down our or we can revise our antibiotics. So in meningococcal infection, the drug of choice is penicillin G. In H influenzae, it is ceftriaxone or cefotaxime. In staphylococcus, we need to add vancomycin, and if gram negative bacilli or is the organism, then ceftriaxone or cefotaxime along with aminoglycoside has to be given. One very important adjunct to the antibiotic treatment is dexamethasone, which has to be given in 0.15 milligram per kilogram per dose every 6 hourly with first dose of antibiotic for 2 days. The advantage of giving dexamethasone is that it decreases the chances of complications. Like hearing defects are very much reduced if we use dexamethasone. So in every case of meningitis, when we start antibiotics, we give dexamethasone for 2 days. Duration of antibiotics is 7 to 10 days in routine cases. In complicated cases, we need to increase the duration of treatment to 4 to 6 weeks, and duration in gram negative and staph infection is 2 weeks. If we look at the outcome, then 10 to 30% mortality is there. Pneumococcal meningitis cases mortality is very much. Sequelae may be there in the form of neuromotor handicaps, cognitive impairments, behavior disorders, hearing and speech problems, visual disturbances, seizures, epilepsy. Now coming to the prevention, vaccination is an important preventive method to prevent meningitis from Haemophilus influenzae, pneumococci, and meningococci. This is very commonly used now. And chemoprophylaxis we have to give to contacts of Hib meningitis and meningococcal meningitis. We use rifampicin in both these meningitis contacts, and in Hib infection we have to give 20 milligram per kilogram per day for 4 days, and in meningococcal meningitis we have to give rifampicin 12 hourly for 2 days.